that's the income in my mind. Like the money that I make is to buy the food and stuff, but like the main income is to be with my family.
Welcome back to another episode of the Christians Talking Business podcast. My name is Kurt Storing, your host, and this episode is brought to you by Proclaim Podcasting. If you are a Christian coach, an entrepreneur, you've got a podcast, and you love just hitting record, but you don't want to do any other work, go to proclaimpodcasting.com, book a call to see how they can help with your full service podcast editing solution. Today's episode is with my friend Joey. Joey Kuhlow is your full name, and your business is called DremeWorks, which we're going to talk about today. And man, thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to share this, because I was fascinated almost from like a spiritual level with your business. Because before I hit record with this, I was telling you about my like, man, resistance, rebellion against God's initial curse on the land to work. And I think your business is really cool because you're working diligently and faithfully, and you're creating a lot of cool things. So thanks for coming on, man. And I wonder if you want to just give us a quick overview of the business. What is DremeWorks? What do you do? Where do you do it? And then I'll sort of ask some questions to fill in the gaps.
Sure. So yeah, DremeWorks, spelled DREME. That just kind of came from when I originally started making things. I was using a Dremel, a rotary tool that you can put different bits in for cutting, grinding, whatever. So that's where the name came from. Uh, and as long as I've had it, it's morphed over the years, but it's always incorporated a mindset of kind of frugality and resourcefulness, using materials that are either being thrown away or not really being used anymore. So it started out with a lot of artistic welding. That was my original kind of inspiration, just welding different robots or creations. And I realized that had a number of people affirmed me over the years that I had kind of a knack for seeing how this piece of metal can be incorporated into this creation, and realizing that that's not just something that everybody sees. A little bit of a God-given gift there to kind of be creative in that way. And over the years, just other people started throwing ideas at me, other things I could make, other things I could try. And so, yeah, primarily now I sell on Etsy, dreamworks.etsy.com, as well as my own website, which just opened like kind of earlier this year. Not a lot of traffic there yet, but that's just dreamworks.com. Um, Pretty much all the same products though on each page. And I opened my Etsy shop in 2009. So wow, okay, 15 years ago. It's crazy. Just realized that. But yeah, 2009. So I've been on there for a long time. And like I said, over the years, things have changed, but it's really just grown organically. Haven't done a lot of marketing. And about 8 years ago, I'd say, is when it became a full time income for my family. What I was making back then wouldn't work for our family right now because I have 5 kids and they're growing and stuff like that. But we were where we were at back then, and we were able to make it work. And as the years have gone on, God has just supplied the increase along the way.
And that's so cool. And so it looks like, as I'm looking at your website or your Etsy, you make a lot of interesting jewelry by the looks of it, mostly from uh, what would you say, cutlery, as well as guitar strings and piano strings. So give us like the quick overview of the actual product that you're selling. And like, are these all specifically made to order, or do you like do stuff in advance?
Sure. Yeah. I do pretty much everything is made to order. So I do guitar string rings, which is just used guitar strings that I get from Guitar Center for free. And I weave them in a circle, different types of weaves, different colors incorporated together, solder them to make a ring, some engagement rings or promise rings type styles that will have a stone in them. That's what I did for my wife's engagement ring, wedding ring. So also bass strings, stuff like that. I do the piano wire. Oh, sorry. With guitar string, there's also bracelets, pendants, and things like that. Piano wire, same thing. Some rings, bracelets, pendants. Sometimes they're hammered. Um, or made into hearts, different kind of pendants, treble clefs, things like that. And the silverware, the silverware rings is probably the main thing that I sell on my website. It's basically taking the handle of a piece of silverware that is relatively ornate, usually, or has something kind of unique about the handle that would make a cool design, and then wrapping it in different ways to make a ring. And one of the reasons I've pursued particularly some of these things is for the purpose of the profit margin. Because like there's some artists out there that are all about like, I don't know, it's kind of like the artist culture can be kind of seen as like kind of weird. Like they're really like into, you look at the painting and what does it make you feel? And I'm just like, how can I sell this thing for the most money? Like, I'm not passionate about making my art. Like, you tell me what you want me to make, and I'll try to make it as long as you'll pay me for it. Um, and so I just found over the years with the spoon rings in particular and guitar string rings that there is just a large profit margin, and I could work right from my home, right in my basement. The welding I do out in our garage, but the vast majority of what I do does not involve the welding at all anymore. Um, so I'm working right from my basement, and honestly, altogether, it's maybe like 10 hours a week, on average for most of the year. And that's includes communicating with customers, getting the orders in, making the orders, shipping them out right from my home. It's very minimal, and that really gives me a lot of free time to be doing some other things around the home or be involved in other ministries and just be around my family more.
Man, that is actually so surprising because I look at this and I'm like, dude, you have to be on making stuff all the time. Doesn't that get exhausting? The same thing over and over. And I am shocked. So what does that look like per piece in terms of how long you're spending and what are you selling like a typical ring for?
Well, yeah, I don't always tell people this, but I have
Oh,
no problem telling you. But the when it comes honestly, the like I said, with guitar string rings, it's pretty much 100% profit margin. Spoon rings, I can make a spoon ring in about 2 to 3 minutes, custom to the size. So if you see on my site, I've made a number of rings, taken pictures of them, and then I have a bunch of pictures of a whole bunch of different styles, not made into rings, just the handles of different pieces of flatware. People can choose one that they want, um, and different prices for different styles, and then so everything's made custom to order. They can order their exact size, and I'll make it exactly to their size. And, yeah, when I first tried to make a spoon ring, it probably took like an hour and it turned out like a square and it was all scratched up and it was just horrible. But I've made thousands of them at this point, so gotten much more efficient, with my own methods. It's so yeah, the profit margin, and especially for the amount of time invested, I figured I'm probably making, for a couple like $200 to $300 an hour for the time I'm working on my artwork or on the jewelry. And so it's awesome. It's great, to be able to do that from home and have all that extra time to invest in other places as I see fit.
man, that's awesome. I love that. And I totally get it. Like for me, I'm like, I don't care the time that goes into it. It's just a value play. And I totally get, if you came out and told the customers that, some of them don't get that. But here,
Right.
we're about making money, we're about being business, we're about stewarding that well for God, obviously. But super cool to hear the different ways that you can do this because again, I've never even considered something like this. Even though my wife is very creative, artistic, I think she could make stuff on Etsy, and we've talked about that a little bit, but I'm like, we don't have that kind of time. And so to hear that you can make something that's super unique and amazing in, a very short amount of time because of your expertise, is a great thing to know, honestly. But
Right.
let's talk about doing this for 10 years. Like, how does that look in terms of progression? Obviously, like you said, and like me too, when I was doing my websites early on, make $100 a month, and I'm like, oh, there's a chance. Like, let's go. And eventually that just kept us through when our expenses were like $1,500 a month to like $2,000 a month. And they've just continued to grow in a way that, God's again been so faithful. But let's talk about the progression of your business from like, oh, dude, full time, let's go, to where it is
Right.
now and what that looks like. Maybe some numbers if you're willing to share that.
Sure. Yeah. So about 8 years ago is when I went full time. For a while there, I was doing a little bit of that previous seasonal job in tandem with DremeWorks. But with the first year that I think the first year that I just did it full time, I was it was probably only $24,000 we made that year, but my wife is incredibly frugal. I'm frugal. We didn't have any debt, and we didn't have, or we only had one baby at that point, so it's like very very manageable. Um, and yeah, you had asked earlier at a different time about the cost of living, and we are not in a very high cost of living area, so that factors in also. Um, So yeah, that's when we went full time, and then from there it was like 24, then it was like 42, then it was like in the 50, $1,000 a year. Each year it was going up by a pretty decent percentage, and I think it was a year where I made around like 56 or $60,000. I was just like, God, this is weird. Like, like why am I making this much money in this small amount of time? Um, like, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And it didn't make sense to a lot of other people I told either. But as you had mentioned before, you kind of reading through the Bible, chapter by chapter. I was reading through, and the chapter I had come to that day was First Corinthians 9, where Paul talks about his being a tent maker. A lot of Christians might be familiar with that term, but if you're not, basically when we use that term, he talks about he had a job to help support himself while he was still being a missionary, traveling around, sharing the gospel, planting churches. And he's like, I supported myself so that there was no obstacle in the gospel, that there was nothing getting in the way between you seeing how awesome the gospel is, like you having to pay me to be here. Because that's how a lot of our churches operates, is there you have a head pastor who has a salary and he's paid to do that. But Paul's like, and Paul does affirm in other places that that's good. Like, it's good for a worker he's worthy of his wages, especially those who labor in the word. But for himself personally, being an apostle, establishing the church, and because he had the ability, he laid down his right to receive compensation, to remove any obstacle from the gospel. And so at the time, I just felt like God wanted me to do more things ministry related with the extra time that I had. And at that time, I was doing some prison ministry, just going into different prisons kind of around Wisconsin where we're at, and having the opportunity to talk with the guys and share the gospel. And that was really cool for a season, being able to do that. And later that looked like kind of actually pursuing planting a house church, which didn't fully come to fruition, but I did get training for that. And kind of one of the main stipulations we have with planting a house church is you kind of have to be bivocational. You can't expect, 5 or 6 families meeting in a home to be able to pay you a salary. Um, and so I still see very much that that's something God has is going to use in some way, that extra time for ministry, and even for my family. But as of now, that's not necessarily directed towards anything in particular at the moment.
Yeah. Is that sort of a level that you guys have maintained with the business?
Yeah. So honestly, 2020, when COVID hit, was actually like our biggest year, or one of them, because everyone went online for shopping. Like, everyone got a stimulus package, at least here in America. And then everyone just was like, hey, let's support small businesses, when it's like the online businesses weren't really suffering. It was all the brick and mortar businesses. But I remember the day that everyone got their stimulus packages because I had a ton of I had like $1,000 in sales in that one day. I was like, "Wow, cool." Oh, um, but I had a $100,000 in sales in 2020. Um, and then from then till now, it has ranged anywhere from 80 to $100,000 in sales and overall, you're talking profit margins. Etsy takes a small cut. You got transaction fees and things like that. I I'm pretty and even with the cost of buying, silverware or inventory, things like that, um, I think I'm probably at a low to mid 80 percentile profit margin, even with all that stuff. So yeah, once you take out all those other things, I'm probably from my gross sales, probably profiting maybe 83% of that.
Praise God, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's
I
really
love
nice.
this. I love this so much because like this podcast necessarily has to be different from the worldly stuff, which again, the first guest on this show, Nick Graham, he was talking about all the secular podcasts about money, 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 money. Like that's it. And obviously that's fun because I'm just interested in that. But I think what this gives us an opportunity to do is really take a step back and challenge the assumptions of what we think is sexy in business. Like,
Mm.
what does it really mean to have a successful business? And I would say, like, maybe it's not super sexy to be like, yeah, I'm making like a high end income on Etsy working 10 hours a week. And I think that's amazing. And I think we have to make
I
sure that
think it's sexy.
I imagine you do. I imagine your wife and kids think it's pretty good too. But like it's one of those things, dude, like, to be very frank, that most people wouldn't be like, "Oh, dude, I want that business so bad because it's gonna make me $1,000,000." But it's like, dude, the hourly rate, the impact you're having, the ability to stay at home, you guys don't have a mortgage or anything. Like, dude, this is like you've really done an amazing thing here to use what God's given you and to work diligently. And I know before the call I was talking about I have always been about how do I make it huge? How do I get the passive income? How do I sell my thing for a lot of money so that I never have to work again? And it's
Mhm.
like, bro, like stop rebelling against the curse. I've talked about that in an episode before. And I'm only now realizing like the real soul enriching nature of doing honest, diligent work. And so I'm very excited by this. And I think that this is not only like achievable, but like desirable for where we're going. Because I think there will be a lot more people as AI continues, as
Right.
as people want more of a personal touch. This style of business, I think, is going to be even more interesting to people. So I wanted to ask you some questions about like the behind the scenes, I suppose, in terms of like selling
Yeah.
online and all that kind of stuff.
As you were speaking, one thing that came to mind, I was trying to find the verse. It's in First Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 10. It says, "But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one." Um, and I think there is something just very I guess, noble in general, like, in just doing the work, and I've been drawn into a lot of the passive income stuff, whether it's, network marketing or Bitcoin or trading stocks, like, whatever, like, it's tempting because guys are like, "You can get rich so fast," and what I've found is just, like, because I used to care a lot about money. And I still might struggle with that at sometimes, but God really freed me of that in a lot of ways. And I think that's what enabled me to be like, I don't need to make a lot of money because like the biggest value for me is being able to be around my family. Like that's the income in my mind. Like the money that I make is to buy the food and stuff, but like the main income is to be with my family. And if I'm perfectly honest, Kurt, like I haven't taken advantage of that time with my family as much as I could have, and I really regret that. And I know you've even talked about in your other in dad work and what you do there. Shameless plug for dad work. I listened to a lot of different masculinity podcasts, but it eventually just kind of got whittled down to I was really just listening to the stuff you put out there because it was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thanks, man.
But one of the things you would talk about a lot is just being present. It's like you're there, like I'm physically present, but are you mentally present? And I, I know I've talked to you about this before. I likely have ADHD, and that's a recent discovery. And so it's kind of opening my mind to realize like just how distracted I've been and how my mind is constantly running and switching from one thing to the next and to the next. So being present in particular is difficult. But now that I have that understanding that that's there, it's helping me be a little bit more aware. But if I could go back, I've had all this time. If I could go back, I wish I could invest that time in being more emotionally and just mentally present with my family because
Yeah.
having the time doesn't automatically equal that it's quality, that it's good.
That's man, that is such an important point for everybody in our position, Christian fathers starting a business, trying to keep everything sorted. And literally, that's part of why this podcast is in existence because I want to hook people like me who are like, ooh, business. Like, let's nerd out about that. How do you make money? How much? Sweet. Can I do that? That's fun and that's awesome. But the more important things, I can't remember which gospel it is it a Matthew or one of the other ones, maybe you'll know. The parable of the steward, where it tells us to use our unrighteous wealth to make friends who will welcome us into eternal dwellings. And I think generally that principle,
Mm.
like we should be using this stuff as business, as like basically monopoly money in order to do things that are really important, like
Right.
spread the gospel to other people, like be with our kids, like be with our wives, like take advantage of that free time and not fill it with, oh, how do I make more money? It's like, bro, if you're making enough, then what are those disciplines look what do they look like to actually step away? And that's maybe a question that we should dive into, maybe in like a specific podcast about that, because that is like the question in our modern age about how do you not be distracted? And I think
Mm.
the enemy is using distraction specifically as a highly useful tool to get us away from God. Because if you're distracted moment by moment, what motivation do you have to look up and ponder why are we even here? Like that's for
Right.
me. I see a lot of people not even ask the question. Like I was almost like that too a couple years ago. I was like, well, I didn't even think about that. So anyway, that's a long tangent. But I'm curious on the timepiece. Have you ever thought about filling that with more of this business or something else? Can you scale this? Is it just like if I had more orders, I'd do them, or is it intentional that you're sort of working these 10 hours a week and going from there?
I think one of the big thing that's been on my mind recently, and maybe in the past couple of years or so, is incorporating my kids into what I'm doing and making this something that I would be able to pass on to them and giving and transferring over the entrepreneurial mindset to them. So, when I'm packaging orders, they're usually one kid is almost always helping me with that, like putting things in the bags, putting the labels on the envelopes, stuff like that. Um, but my oldest son, I have taught him to make a couple of the things that I've made. Um, and so I'll pay him a percentage if he makes those for me. And then I gave him a different idea where I told him, I was like, "Hey, you make this. It's actually these fishing lures made from spoons. The head of the spoon. So again, we're recycling the recycling here. I use the handle for the ring, and then I just have literally buckets and buckets and buckets of spoon and fork heads laying around. And so he'll take a spoon, like a spoon lure for fishing, drill a couple holes in it, and put some fishing hook on it, and then we can customize it with stamping or engraving for people that want to make it kind of like a Father's Day type present. And it got silver or stainless steel or gold plated stuff. And I helped him create that listing, and I told him, yeah, he's going to get 100% of the profits coming from that. So when that's ordered, and he's just like, every time like an order comes in, it's just way more than we've paid him for chores around the house. So he's just like stoked. He's 9 years old, by the way.
Nice.
So my mindset has been, to kind of get around to answering your question a bit more, is filling the spaces with doing some more intentional things with the kids to teach them life skills, more or less. And that might be serving some other people at our church, but it might just be projects around our house. We got chickens, we got animals, helping maintain that, helping, redo the chicken coop and fix it up. A lot of my kids are couple of my kids anywhere are pretty good with power tools already. Like they just know how to use them. Uh, from an auction recently, I got this massive amount of lumber, this kind of used lumber from a concrete business for $35. It's an incredibly insane amount. But now I have all these short boards, a lot of longer ones too, but the short ones, and I just told my kids, "Hey, like, let's build something with this," or "Hey, take it off into the woods and build a fort, and like here's my drill and here's a bunch of screws and have at it." And they're just building this awesome fort in the woods. Um, and some of this mindset has come from, are you familiar with Apogee Strong?
Yes.
That kind of new school mindset of, I watched their documentary and that was just really inspiring to me. And this mindset of educating our kids in ways that are actually going to help them live in the future, not just rote memorization of stupid stuff that you're going to forget anyway, but teaching them math in the context of, okay, we're building a doghouse and this is what we want the dimensions to be. And now you're looking at a tape measure and you're having to subtract. So you're doing math, you're still learning those skills, but it's all in a context that you're actually going to use that skill someday. Um, so that's, I'm going to teach them how to weld soon. Those are the little things that I've been kind of filling my time with a little bit more, those projects that I can get them involved with.
Man, that's so funny. My son and I, we made what's called a bow bench, but it's basically where you put a, piece of wood, usually like a sapling or something like that, and you can lock it in with like a foot mechanism. And he uses his draw knife to make like a bow out of this piece of wood, and then he strings them up and makes bows and arrows. But we did this together, and I was in the garage and I was on the bench and I was like, "We gotta find the angles." Like, I know I've gotta cut this at like a 15-degree angle, but like, I don't know how to do that. I don't have like a table saw. I've got like just a hand saw. How are we gonna do this? I was like, "Oh, math. Like, let's go." It's like, remember that stuff that you
Math.
hate doing? It's actually what we're gonna do right here. And so yet we did the exact same thing, and it's so real. And I've been thinking about, actually I told my son like 6 times the other day, and he's like, "I get it." Because I'm like, dude, I got to get you in here learning how to edit audio video because you're going to be my like next employee. And so that's going to
Right.
give you a chance to figure things out when it's low risk because you don't need this skill right now. But there's so many things that I do today which I learned just by accident. And imagine what it will be like for us with almost like these businesses aren't even so much, who cares so much about like the profit center or whatever? It's like, here's where we get to bring our kids in to teach them skills
Mhm.
that they will then build way further than we ever could. So I'm also
Right.
really excited about that. And I love to hear that you're doing that with your kids as well, because like, man, who knows what other listings there's going to be? I'm going to look in like a year from now, there's going to be like 30 new listings. It's like, okay, Joey's got his
Right.
kids in there. Man, that's so
Well,
cool.
yeah, one of the other things that we're gonna try for this summer is, we're gonna try to get in the farmer's market and get, like, not a full-time vendor slot, but because that's already full, but maybe like six slots, where we can fill in periodically throughout the summer. And, my son will bring some of his fishing lures, I'll bring my rings and stuff. We'll be able to make these items, right, for people on the spot if they want something customized. Um, I w Our girls, love doing baking things with their mom, so, we were gonna have, like, some bakery items, but unfortunately, they said that wasn't, they weren't gonna allow any more of that because they already had a bunch of it. So I was like, "Man, what else can we do to kinda just encourage that entrepreneurial mindset?" And sometimes what I do is I'll just go around our yard or kinda around some fields nearby when I'm driving home, and bunch of wildflowers and just pick a bouquet of flowers for my wife and give it to her. My kids have enjoyed doing that. I was like, hey, you go to a farmer's market, you see people selling bouquets of flowers. We could just, early in the morning, all of us get out there, cut a bunch of flowers and bring the bouquets. And it's like, there's 100% profit margin right there, guys. Like, and we can totally undercut all those other people selling the flowers that do this for a living. We're gonna crush it. Get the girls out there in their cute dresses. Oh man, like so these are some of those. I don't have really a whole lot of more business ideas for myself. I do have an Airbnb that I haven't put it on Airbnb yet, but I built a tiny house in our backyard. But so that'll be a little bit more side income, but even that's something I want the kids more involved with. It's like, hey, if you help maintain this thing, clean the sheets, like clean it up after one person, like I'll I'll pay you to do that and help maintain that area, make it look nice, make sure there's no trash, whatever. Um, so uh, yeah, I'm not as concerned about growing my own personal business. It's at a point beyond wherever I ever thought it was going to go anyway. But the opening that door to see what are they interested in and how can they help and what are they capable of, I'm excited to dive into that more and more.
That's so good, man. Let's stay on this because I know that there was one more that you mentioned, which was selling and or installing reclaimed wood. I'm going to ask you about
Oh,
the
sure.
Etsy and the online sort of thing in a sec, but do you want to tell me about that? What does that mean for a business idea?
Sure. I mean, like, if you can see my house, I I did a lot of finishing work in our house with reclaimed wood, basically from pallets. That was just kind of a trend for a while. Like you take pallets and you got the different colored boards all over it. Like this is reclaimed wood right here. This was from a metal shed on our property, like this corrugated tin that was just falling apart. I was like, well, I'm just gonna use that in my house so I don't have to buy new materials. Um, but yeah, basically, you can get pallets for free just about anywhere. And I welded myself a tool that allows me to kind of rip boards off of pallets really easily. And I've taught my kids how to use it. And they can, they know how to hammer the nails out, pull the nails out. So we can get all these boards, different thicknesses, different colors, different, how weathered are they, whatever. Um, and and just by getting pallets and giving it to them to kind of process and stack and put in different whatever, it's like that's something we could sell on Facebook Marketplace or other places where people just want to do one wall in their TV room. They want reclaimed wood. It's like, well, here you go. We've got it all for you. And, for obviously for an additional cost, like if you want us to install it, I've got air compressor, air nailers, stuff like that. So again, those are some of the skills that some of the older kids are a little familiar with already. I haven't done that one yet, but it's just another thing that's just kind of rolling around in my mind. Especially now that it's summer, it's a little bit more easy to get outside and do those things. Um,
Love it.
that yeah, help keep them busy and productive, instead of just most of life being a game or being playtime, but get them thinking more towards like, yeah, how am I getting prepared for life or how can I contribute more?
That's amazing, dude. I love that idea. You said you made a tool. It's like, okay, like that's
Yeah.
amazing. I also saw you have like a four splitter axe or something like that. Like, dude, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, so I want to know a little bit more about the actual like Etsy side of things. What
Okay.
percentage would you say you guys sell through Etsy SEO versus e-commerce like your website or ads or whatever?
Um, I Etsy, does do some external advertising for me. I haven't looked at those numbers recently, but the last time I did, every time I look, the vast majority of people coming to my site are coming through Etsy, the Etsy's own search engine. It's obviously a big enough platform, enough people are familiar with it. It's like, oh, if I want something handmade, we'll go to Etsy. So, um, while they do have some of the I think as of now, it's a 5% commission they take on every sale, 20 cents to post a listing. This is all US currency, by the way. Um, and I can't remember if there's something else in there, and nothing off the top of my head. But yeah, that m- most of it comes uh, through Etsy itself, and then pretty minimally through Instagram or Facebook or whatever. I think Google search is probably the next highest after Etsy, but it's still quite a drop, I'd say.
Okay.
I will say though, like as far as guitar string rings, I have kind of scoured the internet. No one else is making the the stuff I make isn't that complicated, but no one else is making it. And so I think, if you did a Google search of guitar string rings, even just from Google's platform, I'd probably show up pretty high on on those pages, just because there are people that do guitar string rings, but they're more like a guitar string incorporated into a solid ring or a wood ring instead of the whole ring just being guitar string. There's not a whole lot of people that do it, and there's certainly not people that do the styles that I do.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm just looking at this and I see on the guitar string ring, like you said, there's like one guitar string inside of a otherwise, metal or whatever. And then yeah, you're the top one that doesn't actually look like that. And it looks like,
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of reviews on this thing. Man, yeah. People seem to like this, but I would never even think to like
Yeah.
search this. And so do you know how people are coming across? Is it like homemade rings? Is it handmade rings? Is it spoon jewelry? Is it like, are people searching for guitar string rings? Like, does that data exist inside Etsy? Or is it just like they
Yes.
have a algorithm and they show people random listings? I don't shop on Etsy, so I have no idea how it
Right.
works.
Right. I could probably pull up the stats right now. This here says Etsy brought 74% of the visits. You brought 26% of visits. That's through, yeah, social media and stuff like that. Um, my main listings that are selling are the spoon ring ones, and the main keywords, which is what I'm kind of, it seems like that's kind of what you're asking, right? Um, the the keywords would be, yeah, pretty basic guitar string ring or a spoon ring. Um, I have a lot of other stuff in there, like, anniversary gift for, whatever, or personalized jewelry, because my wife helps me out by doing engraving on these rings, for the spoon rings in particular. Um, so yeah, back when I first made the listings, I did a lot of research on kind of how to get the right tags and right keywords to direct people there more. And so I came up with some more creative ones, or some a little bit broader ones, like gift for him, gift for her. Yeah. Father, hitting more of the holidays, Father's Day gift, fisherman gift, it getting a little bit broader instead of just saying spoon fishing lure or whatever. Like, you have to try to engage people with some of those broader keywords. But every time I've looked at the keywords that I have, it's always it's primarily just been like those big ones, like basically describing exactly what it is. Guitar string ring, spoon ring, that's mainly what's directing people there.
Interesting. Okay. Does it give you stats in terms of like how many repeat orders you have? Like how many people are coming in for the first time versus like, oh, I love this is super unique and I'm just going to buy a ton.
Sure. As of this year, they show on my listings when they come in that this is like a repeat buyer, or maybe they've done it a little bit longer. Um, and that's been kind of surprising to me, because I mean, I'm sure they had that information before, it just wasn't right out there, right on the order itself. But the repeat buyer, I'd say it's about 10-15% of my buyers are repeat buyers. So that, yeah, that's just good to know that. And I have a lot of great reviews, and that's a huge thing selling online is the reviews these days. You get, like, you go on Amazon, it's all about the reviews. Like, everyone's looking for the highest rated whatever. Um, so yeah, I've got a lot of good reviews, and that directs people to keep coming back over and over. And yeah, so that's been really good.
Have you done anything to get reviews specifically? Like, I know when I was selling on Amazon, we just, you'd put things inside the package. Some people would do like extended warranties. Some people would be like, "Hey, there's a free resource if you put your email in here," and then I'm going to ask you for a 5-star review. Have you done
Right.
anything like that?
Uh, I did originally. I just said like, "Hey, if you leave a review, give you a 15% discount on your next order or something like that." But what I found out, and this is something strange, and I don't know if it's just on Etsy, is that like no one, I don't know if that coupon was ever used or hardly ever. And I have thousands of reviews. And I would send this out consistently, over and over, and just like no one ever used it. I was like, I and I don't know why. Now Etsy does have a lot of automated emails set up now. Like if someone liked your item and they don't buy it, maybe like 2 weeks after that, they'll send an email from me that I set up through them, like for a 10% discount on that item. Or the abandoned cart email, like someone put in their cart and they thought about it, but they're, whatever. Okay, here's 10% off if you decide to get it. That sends, again, like a week or so later. And those emails have been pretty successful, I'd say. A lot of people do use those ones. But as far as the reviews, I think Etsy just has it automated into their system after it's been confirmed that the item's been delivered, they will, a week later send a reminder, "Hey, like leave a review for whatever." And if people want to, they do, and if they don't, they don't. I don't, it seems like a coupon doesn't really seem to influence that much.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see the average item review, 5 stars, obviously, but 4,500 reviews at a 21,000 something sales. Like, that's a pretty high percentage. It's like 20% or more,
Right.
if my public math is right, which, of course, I never do public math. So who knows? But that's higher than I would have anticipated. Have
Mm.
you, I feel like I remember you saying something about getting backlash from someone who is like looking at your website or your marketing or something and they found out you're a Christian. How does that come up? And have there been any cool stories about being able to spread, message of hope that way?
Well, I can't remember what all I shared with you, but so this didn't happen to me explicitly, but Etsy is known for being a pretty liberal platform. They've, yeah, been in that space a lot, and I share my faith in the gospel on my about me section on my shop. But I have known, and have been aware of other Christian platforms that have been removed from Etsy that were very successful, but for making basically some kind of statement when it came to like LGBT stuff, or gender issues, things like that. But um, yeah, they're having the concern that being a Christian on this platform, Etsy could, for whatever reason, want to remove me at some point. And that's one of the main reasons I set up my just personal website through Shopify, so that I kind of have a backup there. So I don't necessarily care about directing a whole lot of traffic there right now. I am doing some email marketing through and directing some people there, but it's just there. It's there as a just in case. But it's been a reality for some people where it's like this is a full-time income and it's very successful, and then all of a sudden, without really any explanation, that shop's just gone. Um, but that's the world we live in. Jesus says they hated me, they're gonna hate you. That's the expectation. And I pray that my response, if that were to ever happen, would be, similar to the apostles or the disciples, that just rejoicing that we could be count worthy of that kind of persecution, which is, far less than what they endured, obviously.
Yeah, that's man, that's been in some of my businesses, particularly reliant on Amazon and Google. And I've been smacked by Google before just for algorithm things, not, being canceled. But it is a scary platform risk. And it is different though when you trust in God. because I'm sure it's not going to be easier, or it wouldn't have been easier for it to have happened to me now. But I hope that my response would be less panicky than it was when Google, took out one of my sites, for example. Um,
Right.
and I have lived it on Instagram. Like, I was, what is it, shadow banned or something like that for a long
Yeah,
time.
shadow banned. Yeah.
And, it's like the same thing. These are the risks we take for operating in the world, and yet Jesus, when he was praying to the Father, said, "Don't take them from the world, but protect them from the evil one." And so, like, there's a purpose here, there's a point here for us to be in the
Yeah.
market and sharing.
And you're gonna be rewarded for it. That's what Jesus says, right? Like, it's like, great, rejoice, because great is your reward when you're reviled, when you're persecuted for righteousness' sake or for my sake. So,
Yes.
having that perspective, like, okay, sweet, like, I just got my business shut down. What kind of rewards is that gonna get me in heaven? Like, God
Yes.
gives way better rewards for all of eternity than, this temporary business right here.
Man, that's the challenge. I mean, I'm so new
Mhm.
to this, and it's just been, like I told you before, like, things have been going nuts in terms of the change in my heart about business and making money. So, anyway, this has been awesome, man. Thank you for giving me so much time. I know we had a technical snafu earlier, so this is actually kind of round two you guys are hearing. But yeah, dude, any last thoughts that you wanted to cover that we didn't? I think we got to. Actually, I'm just looking over everything that you sent. I think we got through, like, all of the things that I wanted to cover, that you wanted to cover. But is there anything that's come up that you want to leave people with? Otherwise, just drop the link, and people can go buy their own spoon and guitar string jewelry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's, yeah, you're right. I think we did cover just about everything. And I'd be preaching myself and saying this, but just another encouragement that, yeah, for Christian men as businessmen, like, really realizing what's the priority, and like, what's important, what are you sacrificing for the sake of your work. Um and like we were just talking about there, like, trusting God with the ultimate results. And I've not haven't always had my mindset in that place, but that, like, the kingdom work, the sharing the gospel, the being a part of the body of Christ that God has specifically enabled you and called you to be by his Holy Spirit, that is the main work. That is the main job that we are given as Christians. And it's not our making money or whatever. Like, that's just to enable us to be able to do our spiritual gifting, maybe in a more effective way. Like, the money that you get from your business, that's just a means to an end. It's not the main thing. And what are we successful with our families? Um are we leading our families, our wives, our children well? Where does that need work? Because I think that's one thing you'll probably attest to. You've seen, probably talked to way more businessmen than I have, that they can crush it in the business world but be bankrupt at home. Because guys, we just kind of suck at relationships in general a lot of time, and I am absolutely no exception. Probably the yeah, the main guy in that category. Uh, but you know, I just by continuing to come back to that, continuing to repent and come back to God. God, I'm sorry, I got my priorities off out of whack. I worried more about my money. I worried more about reputation than I did about um, you know, making things right with my family, or confessing that sin, or leading them well, or just giving them the time and making them feel cherished and important to me. Got distracted with life and business and money and all this stuff. So it's a renewal of our mind that we have to do continually. But that that would be my ending thought, to continually work at bringing yourself back to that focus.
Amen. And thank you for that. Where what is it? DremeWorks.etsy.com.
Yeah. Yep,
Okay.
dreamworks.etsy.com. Yeah, that'll direct you to my Etsy page, and that's where the vast majority of my transactions happen. But yeah, dreamworks.com. If the Etsy part is hard to remember. You can just go right there, and like I said, the vast majority of the items I have are also on that. I don't know if I've transferred everything over quite yet, um, but yeah, hopefully plan to grow that as time goes on.
Sweet. Joey, thank you for doing this. Thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing all that kind of stuff. And yeah, man, I'm excited about like small business now again in a different sort of way. I can't wait to get my kids working on something and get them up on Etsy or whatever the case is. So
Right.
thank you for this, dude. I really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate the time. It's always great to talk to you.